Hi everyone, hope you're well. Good to see you all again. Now, if the Prime Minister came to your school, or even the Queen, who's very powerful and important, how would it make you feel? Would it make you feel a little bit frightened and a little bit scared? Well, today's story is all about that a very powerful man called Neymar and a servant girl. In fact, she was so unimportant, we don't even know her name. And so the story is called The Helpful Servant. But before we do that, we've got a rap. So if you're ready, here we go. Let's open the book. Let's take a look. Let's listen and see how good God can be. Let's take a look. Let's open the book. Let's open the book. Let's take a look. Let's listen and see how good God can be. Let's take a look. Let's open the book. Well done. You've been practicing that. So the story, The Helpful Servant. Neymar, a soldier, well, as I said, not just any old soldier, but he was the commander of the whole Syrian army. A very powerful man indeed. But you see, he was afraid. Neymar was ill, he wasn't very well man, and no one knew how to make him better. His skin was covered in sores, and he couldn't feel his fingers nor his feet. Everyone felt sorry for him, and God felt sorry for him too. So one day, God whispered to a little girl who had been captured by Neymar's army and taken back to Neymar's land. Now, as it was, she worked for Neymar's wife. And she said to her mistress one day, "Mistress, back in Israel, where I come from, there lives a man called Elisha. God uses him to make people feel well. If only Neymar could go and see him, I'm sure he could do something for him." Well, before long, the story got back to Neymar about this man called Elisha. And so the great soldier who had fought many of God's people went off to seek this God's prophet. But Neymar didn't go alone. No, he took his servants, he took his horses and a chariot full of treasure. And this was to reward Elisha in case his cure worked. There was a grand parade as Neymar entered the town, and he was expecting a grand reception back in return. But there was nothing at all. It's all very quiet. So Neymar sent one of his men to knock on Elisha's door. The prophet did not even answer the door, but he actually told this servant to say, "Go and tell Neymar, if you want to be well, go and dip yourself 7 times in the river Jordan." Now, it may be that Neymar was just tired from the journey, or maybe he was just frustrated. But it was simply that he was just a proud man as well. And for whatever the reason, the prophet's message made him very, very angry indeed. And he shouted, "The river Jordan, it's filthy. I'll throw myself into any river back in Syria, where I come from. But I would not stick one toe in the river Jordan or take advice from a man that could not even be bothered to come out and see me." "Begging your pardon, sir," mumbled one of Neymar's servants, "but if the prophet had sent you off to do something really, really hard, would you have gone straight away?" "Of course," said Neymar. "I'm a soldier, and I would have gone, yes." "Well then," said the servant, "why can't you do something as easy as like washing yourself in the river? It can't hurt you, can it? And it might just work." Neymar took a sigh and then thought, "All right, okay, I'll do that," and he led all of his men down to the river. He then got into the river himself and dipped himself twice. Looked at his hands. Nothing had happened. He dunked himself under the water twice more. He came up, looked at his hands and his feet. Nothing had happened. The skin was as ugly as ever. Twice more. Still no cure. Neymar was getting very, very angry again, thinking, what is he doing? I'm throwing myself into this river. Nothing's working at all. But then he did it for the 7th and final time, dunking himself under the water. And he came up, spluttering and spitting the water out of his mouth and shaking, the water all from his face. But then he paused and looked down at his hands. And a cheer went out from the crowd, and his servants were all cheering from the side. So Neymar then opened his eyes very wide and looked. All of his sores had gone, and he could feel his fingers and he could feel his feet for the first time in a long, long time. Neymar got dressed very quickly indeed and hurried back to Alicia's house. The prophet himself this time answered the door. And Neymar could not contain his joy. Take all my treasure, take it all, please, Neymar begged him, for you have saved my life. But Alicia said, no, I don't want your treasure, for it was God, after all, that healed Neymar. All right then, said Neymar, and he scooped up a pile of earth from the ground. Let me take this with me so I can stand on a piece of your land and worship God too. Alicia nodded and smiled. And God smiled too. For with that little girl and a muddy river, he had turned his enemy into a friend. A very, very powerful story. So, let me ask you this question. Who do you think was the most important person in that story? Now, I'm not going to give you an answer. I'm going to give you a couple of moments to think who was the most important person in that story you've just heard. Maybe just say to your friend, who do you think it was? I think you're right. It was the servant girl herself. She was the very important person, not the commander, Neymar. Well, there you go. Thank you for listening. But let's just reflect how that makes us. And in a moment, I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to think about a time when a person or people helped you when you was poorly. So, close your eyes and think about somebody that helped you when you was last poorly or ill at home, maybe in bed. Just think it through. It may have been a doctor, maybe a nurse, or your own family. Who was it? Don't tell it out loud, just think it through. And whilst you're still thinking, lastly, I'd like you to say thank you to that person, not out loud, but just a simple thank you. Well done. And so I'd like to end our story and my time with you by saying a prayer. And like always, if you want to make it your own prayer, please say Amen at the end. So once more, please close your eyes. Dear God, thank you for using a little girl to help Neymar get better. Please be with anyone we know who is ill today and help them get better too. Amen. Thank you very much for listening to me. I look forward to seeing you all again. Until then, take care now. Bye-bye now.